This is Unit 9 on Basic Geometry, and today's learning target is I can find area and perimeter of a rectangle, parallelogram, and triangle. Okay, so some of the vocabulary terms that we're going to discuss are parallelograms, perimeter, area, height, and base. Here you see a quadrilateral, which is also a parallelogram and also a rectangle. To find the perimeter, we would start in a corner and move all the way down one side, down the next side, down the next side, and up the next side. So if we add those together, that would be 4 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3. We would get a perimeter of 14 units. For area of the same shape, we're going to multiply the squares that run across and the squares that run down. It's an array. So by multiplying 4 times 3, we get a total area of 12 square units, which can also be written as 12 square units. Okay, here are some quadrilaterals. A quadrilateral has a choice of being a kite, and a kite adjacent sides are the same length. They have 2 sides that are the same length, and the other 2 sides that are adjacent have the same length. They could also be a trapezoid if they're a quadrilateral. A trapezoid has one pair of parallel sides. This is an isosceles trapezoid, meaning that this side of the isosceles trapezoid and this side are actually the same length. The third type of quadrilateral is a parallelogram. A parallelogram has the opposite sides parallel. So both of these sides are parallel and the top and bottom are parallel. Once it's a parallelogram, it could be a rectangle, which is a parallelogram with right angles. It could be a square, which again is part of a parallelogram and part of a rectangle. And this object has right corners and all the sides are the same length. And the rhombus is a different type of parallelogram. Its sides are the same length and none of the angles are right. So let's look at this quadrilateral, parallelogram, and rectangle. We're going to decide what the perimeter is. So if we had a formula, it would look something like length plus width plus length plus width. So we would add the 5 units plus the 3 units plus the 5 units plus the 3 units. So when we add those together, we'll get the perimeter. Now you could also look at the formula as 2 lengths plus 2 widths. So I could get 10 plus 6, where I added the 2 lengths together and I added the 2 widths together. Either way, I get an answer of 16 units for my perimeter. For the area, I'm going to multiply the length times the width. So I'm counting the squares inside the shape. If I multiply 5 times 3, I get 15 square units for the area. Okay, what other parallelogram has 4 right angles? We talked about a rectangle. Yes, we have a square. So, can we use the same area formula? We know that the perimeter is going to be going around the sides. So we're going to add 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 to get 16 for the perimeter. And in this case, the area is the same, 4 times 4, which is 16 square units. Notice that the perimeter just is units because we're just measuring along the sides. But the area is the inside and we're using squares, so we're going to say square units. Okay, here's a parallelogram. And in this parallelogram, we have a length of 10 units, a slant of 9 units, and a height of 8 units. Notice that the height of 8 units is the perpendicular. That's why it's called the height. So if I was going to look for the perimeter, I would need to add the 10 plus the 9 plus the 10 plus the 9 to get a total of 38 units. So this is a magnified version of our parallelogram. if we were to cut along the height of the parallelogram, we could move it to the other side of the parallelogram, and it would line up to look just like a rectangle. So now that we've moved our parallelogram, it now forms the rectangle, and we can apply that same formula for area. So if we're going to measure the area of this rectangle, we're going to count the squares across and multiply them by the number of squares down. So we have 10 times 8, or 80 square units. So this allows us, when we see a parallelogram, to use the same formula that we use for a rectangle or a square. However, there is something you should pay close attention to. Here is our rectangle that we created. Here is the parallelogram that we started with. So how do the dimensions of the parallelogram, which don't have right corners, relate to the area of the square or rectangle? This is the perpendicular to the base, or the length, and that's the width or the height. And here is the length or base. So of a parallelogram, it's the base, and if it's a rectangle, then it's the length. We need to be careful that the height has to be a perpendicular line to the base, just like the side of a rectangle. So we can use the same area formula, length times width, but when we're looking at a parallelogram, we want to make sure we take the length as the base and the width as the height, the perpendicular to the base. Okay, it's time for you to try this. I would like you to find the perimeter of this rectangle and the area of the rectangle. Next, you're going to find the perimeter of the square and the area of the square. Okay, so let's look at a rectangle. If we were to cut the rectangle in half, what would we form? We'd get two triangles. The two triangles make up the same area as one rectangle. So, what happens to the formula? Well, the formula for a rectangle is base times height. If we take the base times the height and we divide it by 2 because we've cut the area in half, we should have our new formula for a triangle. So, if we have a triangle that has a base of 15 and a height of 5, and I know this is the height because it's perpendicular to the base, then we would multiply 15 times 5 and get 75 square feet, and that would be the area of the rectangle. To find each triangle, we would have to divide it by 2, so we get 37.5 square feet. Okay, here's one for you to try. I've given you the dimensions all the way around the triangle, and I've given you the height of the triangle. So find the perimeter, and then find the area of the triangle. Okay, before you finish, tell me something that you learned or were reminded of, and a question that you have.